And,
Yeah, we are.
and I'm not talking about, very quickly, we are very quick to refer to the criminal element of society type of thing. Us in this room. We park where we want. We drive as fast as we want. If you get a fine, you see, they must just about kick your door down before you pay them or refuse to give you your next license or sell your car. Otherwise, you don't pay the fine at all. You just make sure your worst fear in the world is that you're going to pay too much tax. You just want to pay enough that you can stay out of jail. And it's a mentality in the country and it comes from a background in the country where we don't respect authority. And that has now washed over many generations, but it's become a contextual reality of South African people. We don't respect authority. We bring it into businesses, we bring it into society in general. In many countries, I promise you, people would never do that. In South Africa, we will do that. And so it's when you live in societies. I studied in Sweden, and I was amazed at the fact that people listen to that extent. But amazed up to the extent of boredom.
Yeah,
where I thought this was the most uninteresting society in the world.
That was my comment, and that's boring. We live in an exciting country.
We do. Exactly. I remember once, one of the professors he left South Africa 22 years ago. He stays in Canada. He can't stand South Africa. But he still loves the vibe of it. And we were walking in this university in Sweden into the cafeteria, and a dustbin fell over. And he said, "Oh, there's a riot here." We thought it was so funny in terms of that they would not in their life see a riot in. So we were starting to say, that they really killed the last bit of Viking blood that they ever had. So that is out of the DNA, it's never going to be there again. But in a way that, on the one side, I so appreciate their society because everything works.
Yeah, but it's the same like in Europe. If you're walking and you actually drop a cigarette on the floor, somebody will actually walk behind you and pick it up and say you dropped something. And, especially like in Germany, the place is spotless.
Imagine that happening here.
But you've got to change the mindset.
Yes.
Everybody's running behind everybody.
Huh?
If it happens here, everybody's going to be running behind everybody.
Exactly. So in a way, we do have a chaotic society in many ways.
It's because of the poor service delivery that we had.
Yeah.
There's lots of issues around it. That's lawlessness.
Yes, and that is kind of allowed. Now, there's often laws coming out that's impossible to implement. So the more, ETOL.
It's like ETOL is also
ETOL, perfect example in terms of it. Let's see if they can abolish it. Let's not buy it. That would not happen in another country.
But they would have done it differently in another country.
Feeling guilty then?
But ETOL is filed in most other countries, the way that is implemented. It is the failure rate on it.
But why did it fail in other countries?
And the odd thing is, in other countries, the reason to fail was not as high because they do have good information about people, and people have actually roadworthy vehicles on the roads and all of that. In our country, we've got lots of illegal licenses, lots of cars that is not registered, lots of issues, lots of people like you and me that just refuses to buy it. And where in another country, they have all of that information. In South Africa, they can literally not follow up on it. How are they going to follow up? It's constitutionally unfair to come after me if you cannot go after so many people that's in any case on that road as well. So there's so many loopholes for it to file. But the problem is, if you don't take that into account when you design something for South Africa, then people are appalled at our delinquent behavior, and it is delinquent but it is very much entrenched. We're very comfortable with that, and we think that it's very exciting to be around here. So it's not as if we're seeing that people are going to change that going forward.
But the system doesn't reflect what she says the correct records, so you can't find people.
There's no recourse.
There's no records, yes.
There's
So initially they should have gotten the records in place.
But they can't.
But they can't.
That's the problem is too big on that side, and so let's see what they're going to do. ETOL versus us. So I don't know. Maybe at some point in time. Yeah, and they're doing quite nice things. They're giving you serious discounts if you do register.
I don't know.
I still want
I
still want.
That's what people are saying.
It's like TV license. As long as you don't have one, you don't have a problem with paying. The moment you have one, it's difficult to stop.
Yes, it's very. No. You either pay or you don't pay, but you
Even
go
if you die, you
halfway
still have
into
to
it.
pay it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very, very true. Okay, so we're back to dissatisfaction. We often support things that we are dissatisfied with. Unfortunately, if you do go into the detail of that, we're not very good at insisting on very high levels of service. we'll often just swap suppliers and so. Think of the opposite. Have you ever been really satisfied with something but you didn't go back? Really loved it, but you didn't go back?
No, it's very seldom.
No?
I mean, obviously, if you go to a restaurant or wherever and you get the food is good, the experience is good, you're going to go back.
Okay, what if the price is really high?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. So there is a,
You see, you go for a birthday.
Yeah,
You go for a treat, so you know that the price is going to be high, so you're not shocked and horrified, you knew it. You go for a real big treat, but do you want to pay that every month for a meal?
Yeah.
In that, then you think, hell no. But it was very satisfactory in that. If you take I referred to a BMW customer earlier. What do you think is the characteristics of a BMW customer? Personality characteristics? Arrogance? Egotistical? It's younger, it's people that like power, status and so forth. That is the characteristic of it. It's people that buy the car for fun, and it's a toy that is around that. BMW customers are called adventurers. And they buy cars for the adventure of the car. They are disloyal. They buy cars for fun, so they're fascinated with cars. And they are so satisfied with that BMW, and yet their tendency to rebuy a BMW is much lower than a person that buys a Merc. A person that buys a Merc's tendency to buy a Merc is very high, but they're called a loyalist. It's a loyalist market. This one is called an adventurer market. So they love the car, but they love the adventure of cars. So they want to experience lots of different, powerful, wonderful cars. You sell a BMW to the child in the person. You sell the Mercedes-Benz to the adult in the person. It's a very different approach that you take around that. Now, so the person is satisfied, but they may not buy the car again. That's why, and BMW has got a stunning CRM system. They now contact people after they have bought a BMW for 2 years. They will contact the person and offer them a trade-in deal.
Hyundai does the same. Hyundai does the same. They
I-
contact you again if you bought a specific model. They'll contact you when the new model arrives.
They will, but quite soon as well. They don't leave you long enough that you start looking for another car, because they say that's the psychology of our customers, in that they love their cars. So while they are in love with their cars, let's offer them the new model in terms of it, and then they give them a good deal on that. And that's how they keep people loyal in it. So the person is dissatisfied, but they're satisfied, but they may not buy again. So there's many examples like that. Take something simple. Maybe I go to the grocery store, I buy a packet of cookies. I love it. I go back to the grocery store to buy the same cookies, but I get there and there's other cookies, so I buy those cookies because I love cookies. And you see what the problem is? There's 15 brands on the shelf that I'm satisfied with. That's our problem today. You know, when people are dissatisfied, it is such an opportunity, because we can understand their dissatisfaction, we can fix it, no? And we can do something about that. But what if somebody has got 5 possible suppliers that they are satisfied with? And then it's an arbitrary choice for them. And that is when relationships become important, experience become important. You know, many other factors become important, and not just the product that the person is selling. So we are sitting in a situation where people are multiply satisfied in many cases, and that we also have to take into account. And that's where value comes in. To say, value says to us that people sometimes go back to places that they don't like a grocery store, because they value the convenience of where that store is more than the products they sell. They all sell the same products in any case, no, that type of thing. So it is what people value, and that is like getting a smaller number of things maybe, but really exceptionally right. You really do that brilliantly. And if we could identify that smaller bundle of things that makes us unique, it could be in operational excellence, it could be in customer intimacy, it could be in product leadership. What is that something that our customers would say, wow, that is stunning? And I then support that with having a marketing-oriented company where people are working together in this energy of making things work in the market. That's the concept of value. Value is getting more than what I'm paying for at the simplest level, getting more than what I'm paying for. And it's a perception. I asked you earlier who's been to Mug and Bean. Whom of you have had bottomless coffee at Mug and Bean? Okay. How many cups do you drink?
Probably go 3, 4.
3, 4, 3, 4, 5. Wow, you're a super user.
First mug and bean in the country opened in Durban, not far from me. I think I got caffeine poisoning. That's how much we drank.
But you know what the funny thing is? I went to Mug and Bean with my daughter, and you know you've got those bottomless, you know, you drink as much as you want.
Yeah.
And my daughter had a coffee, and then I said, I'll have a sip. I ended up paying for 2 coffees now. So I didn't become bottomless anymore. I had to actually pay for 2 coffees. And I said, this is rubbish. So the bottomless only applies to one person.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
Only applies to one
No,
person.
but I didn't know that. I just had a sip. Oh, shoes, you know, I can't finish my coffee. Don't you want to finish, you know?
So, yeah.
But I thought it was bottomless.
Bottomless in general. And that just now we have one going around again, our lawless society. Remember what we've just said? And we do that.
Did you at least pay the bill before you left, not like Leon?
I wasn't going to argue.
I almost didn't put it on the bean as well.
Yeah, let's ask the next question.
Like I
Emma.
said, where are your signs that state that, you know, if you eat bottomless for every individual? Sure.
And I mean, bottomless is a concept. No, it's never been in South Africa before this coffee shop brought it in. It is never in South Africa before Mug and Bean in.
But
And when
they
Mug
didn't-
and Bean brought it out, everybody brought it out.
Yeah, and then they added one Coke as well. They actually shoved my brother out of the store because he can down a 2-liter Coke,
Oh no.
and then he starts drinking Coke, and then he throws the next 2
Yes.
liter.
Because then he's not thirsty anymore. After that, he just
doesn't.
appreciates
He can really drink Coke. So he once went
sounds
to a
like he's
pizza
bottomless.
place or something with a bottomless Coke,
Yeah.
and he just went for the Cokes.
Yeah, they just
And then
okay.
later
Then
they asked
they
him to
have to
leave.
just leave now. Yeah. Amazing.
I've heard of people being thrown out of bars for drinking too much, but not.
That's a
Not on
really-
Coke yet.
He-
Not on
he
Coke.
doesn't
Well,
drink
maybe we
alcohol.
don't know what
He
his
drinks
reaction to caffeine is.
Ah,
Maybe your brother maybe have a bad reaction to caffeine, that he started
It's
having
possible.
other terrible behavior
But he
as
doesn't
well,
drink
and
alcohol,
sugar
it's
overload. You know, he was bouncing off the walls, maybe. Okay, so but when we look at Mug and Bean, it is an interesting one, and we do have 2 super users here. On Mug and Bean, if you look at your national average of bottomless coffee drinkers, people drink 2.4 cups of coffee on average. In Mug and Bean makes money up to your 5th cup of coffee. If you make the coffee a bit strong, people can't drink much. Most people can't, because you'll feel ill after a while. And yeah, so it's a very safe value proposition from their side. Then they combine that with this large portions of food, and then they have this image of what is our value proposition. Our value proposition is generosity. Come here, sit down, have as much as you like, unless you're his brother, and then you go on through the process. But that's the idea of building value propositions. It's not necessarily a company that is sacrificing something. It's understanding the psychology on the customer side. And that is fascinating when we look at how people see value. Take the following example. Imagine I buy a data bundle from you for 100 Rand. But I only use 80% of that. And now you offer me a data bundle for 120 Rand uncapped. Now, whom of you would take that deal? So you would. Whom of you? Remember, I said that you're only using 80% at this point in time. Would you take the offer?
Yeah, you would, because
Simply
now
because
you would
it's
actually be
uncapped.
using much more anyway.
Would you?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe
You
for
would-
the first
I'm-
2 months
I'm
or so,
using a lot more.
you'll exceed the 80 that you normally use, but because
Exactly.
that's not you, you'll go back to your 80.
We are addicted to ourselves. And we will, and there are some customers that will go crazy, it is true, but if you can calculate the margin of people that would do that, in general, people have a specific personality and lifestyle that does not accommodate then this enormous usage of data.
But you
So they will
restricted-
they will have the search and they come back to another level but they don't use that uncapped thing at the end of the day. If we take it over an entire population, remember in individual cases, yes, some people will become super users, but in general, people won't. People go back to their normal behavior. So it is quite a safe proposition often to give to people. Think of people, say that there's just 2 watches, and the one is waterproof at 30 meters and the other one is waterproof at 50 meters. Which one do you want?
You go for a 50 meters.
with the 50 meters in
Alright,
that.
I've
You're
never
not going to
swum
even
50
take a
meters.
bath
Correct.
with that watch.
Correct.
But you know, at most it's going to be in dishwashing water and maybe in a shower. And it is, but yet people want the 50
Value for your
meters
money.
But
one.
I don't agree with that because I mean, if you're paying for when you're talking about a data bundle, you're paying for that amount of data. So let's take for example my daughter. I got to keep topping up on her data bundle. So she's only going to use whatever 80 megs according to what I'm paying for, you know. But if you gave her the option to use more, she's going to use more.
Okay, but how much more? That's the question. Also
Sky's
in
the
her
limit
case,
with a 90
because remember you do have, there's different categories of customers that you have here. For some, and remember that's why I said, of the 100 Rand, I am just using 80% at the moment, so I'm not your daughter, I'm
Because
not
the
that type
price
of
is
person.
dictating to you how much you can use.
No, but I could use then more, because I'm only using 80%. So in your daughter's case, she is using 100% of the 100 Rand that you did spend, and if you give her 200 Rand, she's going to use 100% of that 200 Rand as well. So she is a
Until you
different
get to the-
type of segment.
But
now.
until you get to the point where she uses 80%.
Yes, until that point.
So you'll
And
probably
that's
put in a
interesting.
5 gig and then
Yes.
she'll use 80% of that.
Yes.
And then
Okay,
Yes.
if you make it
See,
under
at some
that,
point in
okay,
time.
okay.
But in my
Okay.
example, I said I only do use 80%.
Okay.
So then the question is, if you then give me more, would I necessarily use more? Not necessarily. So it is just interesting to see how the psychology works. But she's in a very different segment than what the two of us is on that. And we need to take that into account when we are building these things. So when we are asking ourselves, how do we give customers the feeling of they are getting more than what they are paying for? Unfortunately, what we are seeing a lot of in your industry is how salespeople want the deal. And they just add services and services and services, and that adds costs and costs and costs. And then they get to a situation where it's quite chaotic about who's been promised what. And that it does cost the company a lot, and that they can't be on operational excellence because their efficiencies are too low, the cost is too high in what they are doing. So we have a lot of issues in that space at this point in time that clutters it a lot. Because it's not the more you give, the more value you give. And we have to strip it down. We have to step back and say what actually mattered. You know, there's even theories and books written on what they say quality is free. The receptionist we refer to. Would we pay more for a friendly receptionist than for a rude receptionist?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Not
Probably
necessarily.
Employ her the same value and then she'll go work somewhere else because she feels that she's more value than the rude receptionist.
Okay, but yeah, just don't put them next to one another. And so I'm talking about one person. And this is a rude person versus a very friendly person. And often in jobs, when you look at, do you always pay more for the better person? Is there not some? It's not the case. Unfortunately, I wish we can say yes. You always pay more for the good person. It'd be really great for good people to have that advantage. But often, really bad people in organizations get the same income than people that contribute a lot of value. And that's why they say sometimes there's an element of that can say quality is for free, in that a job position has a certain salary scale and the person can only earn that. And so a good one and a bad one, same thing.
In fact, sometimes the bad one earns more than the good one.
Unfortunately,
Exactly.
isn't it? Unfortunately, because there's just many things around. Some bad people are just also very good at positioning themselves and seeing how they can force things or staying long. Companies are sometimes good at underperformance. Do you agree? They protect underperformance. I think that's the better way of saying it. They protect it. Why don't we just expose it and get rid of it? We don't. So, but that's value propositions. How do we build them? It's not about just what is the product versus what is the price. And when we are very involved in business, and often when we're very good at the products that we have, and we have in-depth understanding, we often think that the functionality is more important than what it is. Because it's not just about the functionality, it's about the social experience of the product, the personal experience of the product, the experience with the entire company is also important. It's not just the quality spec of the product. So sometimes really scientific and technical people overdevelop the product. And then they don't understand why do they lose against competitors with an inferior product. And they want to go and explain to people, but ours is better. Well, if they don't think you're better, you're not better. Because it's not a scientific fact, it's a perception. Remember where we started this morning? And if people's perception is, I want this one and not that one, that becomes fact. It goes through your balance sheet and that it's money. Okay, so it's not just about the functional side, it's about the social, personal, and experiential side that I built into the value proposition. On the other side, my cost, it's not just about the money. And often, I should not compete on money first. And why drop the price? You can devalue the entire industry if you do that. You can also look at, how do I save somebody time? How do I save somebody frustration? How do I save somebody activity in terms of it? How do I make it easier for people to deal with me and see if I can rather keep the monetary side in place? So functionality versus monetary, it's always there, yes, but it's not the only ammunition that we have that we can work with. We can develop the product around that very, very differently. And if I'm writing a mere word product on an Apple versus on my Dell, is it a different word product that I'm writing? Or word document that I'm writing? What is different?
The Office for Apple is worse than the one for Dell.
Okay, if I print it out and I give you the document, no, if it came from an Apple or if it came from a Dell and that. But set the experience, and people are willing to pay premium prices on the Apple side for that worse. Yes, exactly. Amazing, but true.
Can I ask you a question? All right. If you have two cell phones, they're similar. How would you describe the cell phone to me so that I can get
Okay.
how would you market that cell phone to me so I can get it's not about money?
No, but it's always about money.
No, okay, but you're saying you must.
I hear what you're saying. I just want to say that, the one thing that we do see in the market is that the concept of really, really premium prices, and please disagree with me if I said, of really premium prices is problematic. And people often want lots of things these days for the same, and lots of functionality, but for the same price.
Okay, maybe I used a wrong product. I'm talking about the size.
So I think I understand what you're saying. Whatever product we buy for the image, what that brand signifies. As an example, we don't buy a Rolex or a Patek Philippe watch to tell time. We don't drive a BMW or Ferrari as basic transportation to get from point A or point B.
Because that would be functional. That
we-
would be the functional side, no.
Well,
the transport side is just functional.
It's
and it's
functional,
not
but
about
it's
that.
a statement. It's a statement about us. Subconsciously, whatever products we choose, it's a statement about us. The clothes that we wear and the brands that we do. And I'll give you an example. I have young kids, and my daughter just turned 14, and she's going to high school next year. And at 16, in 2 years, she's going to get to drive a car. And she goes to me, "Dad, I want a Range Rover." And I'm like, wait a minute, where did this come from? I want a Range Rover. What do you know about cars? All of a sudden, somehow, somewhere, she saw an advert. And that is the image that she wants. There's other kids and companies, this company, Sony, had a program in place years ago where they wanted to get you to be a customer for life. And what they started out with was they had this brand for kids called My First Sony. I don't know if they did this in South Africa because they started it in the early 90s. They came out with a product called My First Sony. So whether it was a little transistor radio, whether there was a small little TV, but they came out with a set of products where I want to build a relationship with you for the rest of your life. And I think that if you look at You know, a lot of the companies out there, they're selling you an image. And take a look at any of the advertising. Look, if I want to buy a Volkswagen Beetle, we know there is a certain type of individual that drives that. I don't know if that is sold here. Tell me, what kind of person drives that vehicle? Is it a male, female, young, old?
Mostly female.
Mostly females. Who drives a BMW 7 Series? Describe that person.
Cabinet ministers.
That's right. Who drives a 3 Series BMW? And so on and so forth. So understand that there's a lot of psychology that goes into any of these product placements. Some brands are young, hip, and cool. Others are stodgy, and they're for old people. Or they're for elite people. As you were saying, there's a brand that's for egotistical people. There's others that are more conservative, more practical. But all of these companies understand the market segments that they're going for, and they're appealing with a value proposition. So it's very, very important to, you know, as we've been talking about this whole week, is to really understand who your consumer is and who you want to go after. And then you have to have a very targeted message. And one thing that becomes very, very important, for the first time, brands are able to create a one-on-one relationship with their consumers. Because of digital media and mobile devices, they have that one-on-one. You know, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, it was print media. If I ran an advert in a newspaper, I'm reaching everybody, and people that are not interested in buying cars. I'm reaching, you know, kids reading comics in the newspaper. It wasn't as effective and so on. But today, with pinpoint accuracy, I can go after the middle-aged executive, or I can go after, you know, the high school student. And this is why digital marketing is so, so, so important. It is really the first time where we have that one-on-one relationship. We're able to bring in personalized messages, relevant messages, and messages that we as consumer would find of value. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And we build personalities behind things in. So in the 2 phone example that you asked, the manufacturer thereof would have designed 2 different personas for the phone. And the one that gels with my personality is the one that I choose in. So it's not a product, it's not a functional product sold at a price anymore. It's a social experience, it's a person, it's an interaction level that I say that I'm comfortable with or not. My example earlier to say what is the difference between the Dell and the Apple at the end. It's the personalities that they've created around that of the type of person that they want to buy. There's quite a lot of nice type, the little bit spoof type ads that you can see on YouTube of Mac versus PC. And where they then show these 2 personalities, where the PC person is this more boring person and the Mac person, this very cool person that's always trying to help the PC person see the light, but he just never does. It's actually very entertaining, the ads, even if you agree with them, even if you don't. But the ads are very well done, but they're very good at explaining that, the difference between these 2 personalities that they've created. And we buy what we are comfortable for. Our example of BMW versus Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz, the elegance, the sophistication, the maturity, all of those things of the brand. The BMW, the fun, the power, the status, the aggression, all of those things that go together with that type of brand. Very, very different in that. Where the functionality of the car is not the difference on the table. It's the personality of the car that's the difference on the table that causes people to buy it in different ways, but also to use it in different ways. And we have to take that into account.
It's the story. It's the story.
Yes.
People buy into the story, into that experience. BMW is the ultimate driving machine. Mercedes has a legacy of elegance and so on. Volvo was about safety and reliability. You know, everything has a story, and we buy into these stories.
And even if you think about how people see things, people almost automatically add personality characteristics to things. Like you said, you know, if you think of a Beetle, who's the customer, they said it's a female, it's a young woman that is buying the car. It's as if even if we've not thought about it before, we can see it when somebody shows it to us of what is the personality that people are buying in. And people are buying into that relationship that they will then have with that type of
The
character.
car manufacturers take it to a level of detail. Tremendous amount of research and thought goes into color choices and what kind of paint they're going to use. So you're not likely to find a lime green Mercedes.
Yes.
I mean, they spend a lot of money
Yeah.
picking both the color and the nature of
Yeah.
the reflection and the paint
Yeah.
tint. I mean, there's a real science. I worked with
Yeah.
Toyota for a number of years, and they spent a great deal of time and money getting just the right paint and the combination based on the target market.
Yes, yes. So the amount of information they have about people is really great. So that's the idea of a value proposition, is not seeing just the flat product, but seeing the identity that we create around that, the value that it provides in the mind of the customer. Now, if you take Starbucks in that, they could have said that they sell coffee. Starbucks sells coffee, so it's a way of coffee. But yet, when you look at what you're paying for a cup of Starbucks, we can't say that they are selling you the coffee in. And they said that they are selling the third place. That you've got a home, you've got a work, and you have Starbucks. And then they create these small but beautiful settings where people can go and sit, and there's Wi-Fi, and there's a comfortable seat, and there's a nice cup of coffee that I bought a cup of cappuccino at a railway station. I paid €4.50 for a cappuccino. And that is really way off if you think about what we pay for that. I think when I was there now, the exchange rate was 14, you know, just before the recession. Then you think like, okay, no, this is just the worst thing in the world. And I could have for €1 gotten that in South Africa. And then you pay €4.50 for a cup.
€7 in Lisbon last week.
Is that? So I got it for a bargain. So now I don't feel as exploited anymore. So,
I paid €9 when I was in Greece in February. €9.
Wow.
That's why
Yes,
the
it's a
country is the
horrible
way it is
feeling.
now, because they charge so much.
it's a horrible feeling. And how that
They have to
things-
charge so much to try to get you
Yeah.
guys for the money.
Yeah,
But
it
it's
is.
the experience, and
Yeah,
Yes.
no,
we'll go
definitely.
in.
And you
Yeah.
paid it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're all
You didn't
complaining.
walk out though, right?
We are all complaining, and we paid it.
Yeah.
So still, because it was valuable
Valuable.
enough for us. It
That's
was
right.
valuable enough for us. So when we look at people that create experiences, you were referring to Singapore Airline, and I mean that is always one of the very good examples. Since Singapore Airline came into the airline industry, many other airlines came in, and they are really good. You know, Qatar is very good, Emirates is very good. There's many of them that's now very good. But you know, before Singapore came in, an airline was really quite horrible. And had they benchmarked just against a normal airline, they wouldn't have created a special experience. But when they created Singapore Airline, if you look at the cases behind that, they said that they called the strategy elegance and grace. That they said they're going to do something and they're going to benchmark that airline against, at that point in time, 5 stars was the highest that you could get in a hotel rating. They're going to benchmark their hotel against a 5-star hotel, and they're going to create a flying hotel. Now imagine your design goes from that angle. We're not going to create another airline, we're going to create a flying hotel. And then they have this more than beautiful stuff that works on these airlines. People with this pitch black hair, this flawless skins, this beautiful eyes that are just gorgeous. And you go through that all-night flights, and then the air hosts and hostesses looks better the next morning. And I always think like, I wonder if they do long interviews with these people, that they can see if they're the deteriorating type or the improving type. I'm definitely the deteriorating type. You know, after shower in the morning, I kind of deteriorate until I go to sleep. And they don't. So it's the strategy was called Beauty and Grace, and how they've positioned that, but a completely different experience than what you find on a different airline. If you look
And
at how they
it's all about service.
Yes.
And it's about putting the customer, the guest, first. Being a smile, giving you something that you won't expect. You know, being helpful, being courteous, being polite. No matter how bad your day was,
It
and you're
doesn't matter.
grumpy and rude, they calm you down. And this is about exceeding customer expectations.
I mean, the one thing that I found quite fascinating around them is, it's difficult to teach people that's not customer oriented to teach people like that customer service because it's kind of something that also is a personality trait. You appoint the right person for that. In Singapore, there's a cultural concept called the Singapore girl. It's a woman, obviously, but she's raised very subservient, very, very subservient. Now, do you think you have to put her on a customer service course? Or is she actually just who she is? I serve you because, are you comfortable? Is there anything else I can do for you? Thank you so much. There's another water for you. Please just phone me. Thank you for that. You know, it's just amazing. They're so soft-spoken, but they're so there all the time in that. They're so strong and so soft at the same time. So it is really an amazing experience, but they designed it differently in that. It did not happen by accident in it. It happens by design. Now, do you think that South African Airways can copy that strategy?
They can. But you know, I'm talking about airlines. Emirates is just as good as Singapore.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been on Emirates
They're
few
lovely,
times.
lovely, lovely,
Turkish
lovely.
Airlines also changed their slogan. They said that clients are not our passengers, clients are our guests. Just
And
by
think
changing
about-
that
yeah.
slogan,
Yeah.
reinvented the whole
Yeah,
airline.
yeah. Qatar is also good. Qatar is also really, really good. So after Singapore, because remember that becomes the new benchmark. So after Singapore, airlines really became better because of a new standard that they placed in the market. I just want to come back to one thing. You know, the one thing that we have to be careful of is to say, let's copy Singapore Airlines strategy into South Africa. We are not Singapore girls. South African people,
not a guy in this room who's gonna
are
touch
we
that.
nice? They're just honestly, in general, South African people, and I say it with, I mean, all the love in my heart, I love this place, I'm never going to go anywhere else than here. And are we nice? Are we polite and sweet and service-like? We're not like that, you know, all of us, we are not like that. And I say, you can send me on any amount of training, I am not going to become a Singapore girl tomorrow. I can fake it for 10 minutes. And then he says, just get over yourself, you know, how much attention do you want? So just don't put me in that situation. So again, if South African Airways wants to find out how do they do it, they still do have to say, this is my labor pool. What makes people special? Everybody's got something special about them and then you recruit for that special element that you can have. And while the World Cup, the 2010 World Cup was running, I was going through the airport, and you know, remember all of those people that were here, and it was just, everybody was saying what's going to happen and how we're going to handle the service delivery and all. And I was standing in the queue at security, and that can get bad enough on a good day, but I mean, it was packed, it was packed, it was packed. And for some reason that I never understand at airports, as how almost childlike adults become. They wait until they're in front and then they start looking for their boarding pass. Then you think you've just been standing in this queue for half an hour and you're now looking for your boarding pass and everything goes slower and slower and slower and you are standing in this queue and this huge South African man is standing there in front and is looking at the story and okay, what now? And the next moment this guy, there's again a lady that's standing there, but not that's a South African lady, and she's there looking for something and he says, come on, no, stop this, get out all of you boarding passes, take out your boarding passes, and you lady, number 8 for you, number 8, come, move it, number 7 for you, number 2 for you, go, number 1, okay, move it on that side, but you know, everybody started laughing. It was so funny after a while of how this guy just took control of the situation, and it was so us, and it was so nice. Nobody, it wasn't rude, it may have sounded, but you know, at the end, because people started laughing as well, and he started directing that, and he did his job, and it worked well, and I thought, great, you know. Let's imagine we tried to get that gentleman to stand there, number 1, please, number 3.
Yeah, we're going to get nowhere.
Number 8. He would be absent by day 3. He's not going to come to work. He would go for psychiatric treatment after 3 days. We can't do that to people either. In that there's not just one right way in. So yes, appreciate Singapore Airline, but also understand it comes out of their culture. And I think that's why it's so beautiful. That it's so authentic.
Yes.
the entire positioning. We don't have to fake things. We can create things based on that. That's why I said earlier, find in Altech what are you fantastic with, and make that something that is really nice.
I think Kalula is doing a good job with their lunch
Yes.
because they use humor.
Yes.
And that is what is
And sometimes it's really off with the humor, but it's so funny.
Yeah.
And they are doing a really good job at making jokes on the airlines.
And
And
in the US called song, and they sing you all the instructions. It's very funny.
yeah, but I mean, the Kalula strategy is a copy of, is it Southwest?
Southwest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they learned from Southwest Airlines of how to do that, and it's about mass air transport in. But then when you do mass air transport, people are under more pressure because it's like a sausage machine that you're feeding through, and then they use humor to alleviate the pressure and all of it off of that. So it actually makes quite a lot of sense when you look at it. You know, like on Southwest, they've gone further than Kalula in that. It's things like they want to get the flights off as fast as possible, so you don't have a seat number on a lot of flights. They just pull the people in from the back. You know how we are. You get to row 3 and then you are packing all of your stuff there for ages, and then you don't want your jacket on anymore, and then you wonder if you should take out your laptop, and people are queuing here behind you until the end of day. So they just said nonsense. You fill up the seats from the back. That's it.
So Herb Kelleher was founder of Southwest. It's headquartered in Dallas. And he said, back to your point about understand your business. And Herb said, our business really isn't that complicated. And I said, well, you know, what's your business philosophy? It's real simple. Butts in seats, seats in the air.
Yes.
And everything they do comes out of that.
The more they
Get
can
'em in the
keep
seat,
that
get it
airplane
in the air.
the cheaper it is to run it. No, there's something like that
That's
I
right.
thought, okay, they need to keep the airplanes in the air, and they pay a lot if they are standing at the airports.
So fill up the seats quickly.
Fill up the seats and get
them
them
in the
off.
air.
In. Yeah,
And
so,
it's a simple thing.
Yes,
Right.
yes, and then you
That was the
design
point.
everything to say, is this helping me getting butts in the seats and what?
Butts in seats, seats in the air.
Yes, to get that. Does this help me? And if it doesn't help me, don't do it. So it's not about whether we should put nice garnish on the plate. Maybe we shouldn't give people food at all.
And they create the fun culture in their office by, they didn't buy any in their corporate building. They bought no artwork. And instead asked employees, so they took pictures of picnics and family outings and kids' drawings and...
There's no reason to have a horrible office because you don't have money.
That was, so they saved money on art,
Yes.
but they made it a fun
Yes.
kind of
It's
an
my
environment.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's whatever fits your environment, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But do something fun, enjoyable,
Yeah.
and that's something that enhances people's lives around. Okay, so value propositions are created on many levels. We look at how they did the Apple stores. We see how many people copy the Apple stores these days, so they're not that unique anymore. Look at shopping centers. In South Africa, shopping centers work very well. One of the reasons is the high crime rate. No? So people go to shopping centers because they feel it's safer than to be outside, and they are fine to drop their kids off in shopping centers. So again, an environmental factor. The high crime rate feeds the success of our shopping centers. But look at how nice they make them, and they spend a fortune on creating these experiences in shopping centers in that. So shopping centers itself have value propositions. Think of the difference of going to a Menlyn or a Sandton or a Hyde Park. Very, very different experiences that you'll get from the different shopping centers in how they position themselves.
You know, to your point about understanding what works in your company, Ron Johnson was the gentleman that developed the Apple format and for retail. He wasn't, major. He was pretty significant. But his job was to set the retail experience up. He did that very successfully, obviously. Then took over as CEO of JCPenney, where he flamed out in about a year. Same guy.
Same guy. Yeah.
Just it didn't fit.
It didn't fit.
Over in Penny.
Yeah, it's not to say if you got it right in one place that you can do it
That
again.
you can replicate the same model
Yes,
somewhere else. You have to
yes.
understand the environment.
Yes, yeah. So, I mean, that's always for me the sad thing around how sometimes you see people that are so successful, and if you move them, they are not anymore. Because their recipe worked in a certain environment very well, and it caused magical ingredients, but it doesn't necessarily in another. Yeah. So we always have to pay attention. We can't just copy. we learn from why people have success and we apply it to our context in that to see if it still adds value to people's lives. This is just some ideas of why we would want to create value for customers, where we build this brand in the customer's mind. It gives us loyalty, less vulnerability to competitive marketing actions, larger margins potentially, elastic responses to price decreases and inelastic to price increases. If you have a special, you obviously want lots more people to buy, but if you have an increase, you don't want lots less people to buy. So, and if you can get that into your brand, that is really, really great. To have greater trade cooperation, like we said, your competitors even wanting to work with you maybe, increased marketing communication efficiency, possible licensing opportunities, more favorable brand extensions. So you add other things to the Altech brand and people accept it. They say, this is great, this is more value that is being added. So that's the idea. If you start packaging it in a personalities, people start trusting the personality that they are buying, and therefore that gives you leverage for other type of things. You can have lower cost. Obviously you have to take the cost I mentioned. Remember, benefit versus cost is your value proposition. We have to look at ways that we don't frustrate our customers a lot. Maybe it's less downtime, less required adjustments, lower failure costs or risks, lower installation costs, less incoming inspections, more rapid setup times, faster processing, reduced risk of damage, higher trade-in value, compatibility with more types of equipment. Whatever it is, you have to decide what is this thing that is valuable for your customer. To say, this is the personality that I have created that brings my greater loyalty, and this is the cost savings I bring for people. We cannot see marketing as pretty pictures going forward. It's about balancing this benefit and cost advantage at all times, so it feeds directly into the profit margins that companies are able to make. It makes money. If it's not making money, you're not supposed to be doing it. Okay, now linking traditional marketing to that, traditional marketing is often explained by something that's called the 7 P's of marketing. Product, price, place and promotion. That's the 4 P's of marketing. But then what happened is they said, can your product be copied? Is your product being sold by other people as well? Yes. Can they copy your price? Yes. Can they copy the places where you're selling it at? Yes. Can they kind of copy the type of communication and advertising that you do? Yes. So how sustainable is that competitive advantage? Not at all. And that's when they said, let's add processes to how we deliver the service, because often companies are quite slow at changing processes in that. Let's focus on our physical evidence. If you take your question about Altech versus Altron and what's about, that is a critical question to answer in, because it's what I see. If I see the Altech brand, as you can protect it in. It's what I see is very, very important from the customer side, and how you move between different brands is also very important for that, because it's physical evidence. And the last one on the traditional marketing, and the most sustainable one, is people. And that's we've spoken about a lot. You're in a service organization at the end of the day, looking after how we add value. So the one with the best people win. And you have to answer yourself, what is that? What is the best people, the combination of that? And literally everyone in the organization becomes part of the marketing activity, like the examples that we've shared. Okay, so that's the traditional link of that. Our problem with marketing is that there's too much clutter in the market. So digital marketing for the first time gives us the ability to target single customers, to get a level of understanding that's never been possible before. And when we look at the final parts, just after the next slide, I'm going to show you a little video on how people use customer analytics to understand who it is. It's amazing when you start looking at the extent to which we can analyze people's online behavior, for example, and what we can know from people just based on what they are doing. A digital marketing strategy, when we start bringing it together, to say that on the operating processes side, we look at the acquisition of customers, getting in our new customers. How do we convert people into being loyal customers? And then how do we retain them in? So it's a process that we take through, and it's not the same thing that we do. We cannot confuse acquisition and retention. It's two different things, né? And two very important things for us to take, and in different segments you also have to handle that very differently. Now, this must be supported by your management processes. Of course, it cannot be standing there in isolation, where we have strategy and planning, where we create the vision and we decide what is that personality that we are going to package, what is the value that we are going to give, and how are we going to deliver that to people. We do market analysis and financial analysis and looking at multiple channel delivery systems and all to see how we take this strategy to our customers. We also recognize the fact that if we are going to be good in this digital marketing, we have to realize it's about creating relationships. Traditional marketing, it's like Mark said before, is that push type of idea of I give you information about me, where digital marketing gives us the opportunity to create an interaction, where we said even on your situation, a very internal situation with a user that says, I need you to help me. How do I use the invite? This is how I can help you. Then the assistance and then the feedback of not just marketing your unit, but also generating management information. In that way, you create relationships with the users you're helping, with the managers of the users you're helping. You have relationships with the employees, your technical people that's working on your side. There's many relationships that come into play there. And the more successful that relationships are, the better the strategy will run. And that is one of the beauties of digital marketing. It gives us that part of the value. So it could be interacting with senior management, interfacing with marketing, interfacing with IT, obviously, staff development, managing external relationship, management improvement. That staff development, education and retention just becomes really important. In our early conversations this morning, they said, but Altech is not doing this or Altech is not doing that, and they are still into traditional marketing and they are not using it sufficiently and they are just using Hello Peter. Now, often it's a case of how do we develop the capacity inside the organization to do that? It's not just a clear transition, the one from the other. So people are now sitting in a situation where marketing feels to some people as a very controlled field. This is the information I want to give you. Where in digital marketing, it's a case of to say, I have things that I would like to share with you, but I also want your reaction on that. And then we're going to put processes in place to manage that, to manage the reputation of the organization. So it takes time for companies to really get into that. And for the different business divisions among yourselves even, it does not have to be a formal process where there's a centralized marketing division being created. It might start off as a digital marketing forum that you said, once a month we're going to talk about digital marketing opportunities that is lying in our industry, and you take responsibility from the different business units to start sharing digital marketing ideas on a mere marketing forum that might run one lunch hour per month in. And yeah, have fun. People bring sandwiches, they sit around, they talk about these things. You can maybe get somebody to come and talk about it. But in that way, we start transferring that skill and build the capability set of our staff to be able to do that. It is not, I don't think I have to convince you of that. You've seen it inside the discussions today, as there's some resistance and there's some systemic problems of putting digital marketing fully in. And we can create safe forums for that. It's not about criticizing, it is about finding other ways and using platforms like this to get that discussion going. So if I have my operating processes, my acquisition, conversion and retention on that side, and I understand my strategy and we are building relationships on my management processes, what does this also then relate to? Well, what we see is we can do performance improvements through understanding what is going in here. So it becomes management information. So marketing information is not, again, just about the communication element, but about how we improve things. I do web analytics, customer analysis, all the study of what you said, should this paint be lime green or whatever is that specific lime green we're looking for. There's quite a lot of analysis that actually goes in behind that decision. There's information. It's not somebody's gut feel that comes up with those type of refined strategies these days. So marketing becomes part of the performance optimization of the organization. You design guidelines and you operate your procedures. You look at technical infrastructure, including your service level management. What is the service level that the customer is looking for? And then we could go back to our earlier talk to say it's not just necessarily just personal service, although people do value personal service. People want a Christopher. But there can be many other stuff, a call center, online checkpoint that people can check out processes, a Twitter stream, and many things that we can use to give people information about where services are and what's actually happening around that, to make sure that we put that in place. So that becomes a strategy that is, yes, it is located in marketing, but it's got many almost tentacles that's running into other parts of the business as well, where we are aligning this business to have a certain level of delivery of services to the final customer. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's have a look at the measurement thereof. I'm going to show this, this talk. It's about 10 minutes. That shows you just what type of things we can know about customers. It's a professor that is doing research around what you can find out if you really look at people's online behavior. And then we're going to have a look at a model that helps us to understand how to gather this type of information.
If you remember that first decade of the web, it was really a static place. You could go online, you could look at pages, and they were put up either by organizations who had teams to do it, or by individuals who were really tech savvy for the time. And with the rise of social media and social networks in the early 2000s, the web was completely changed to a place where now the vast majority of content we interact with is put up by average users, either in YouTube videos or blog posts or product reviews or social media postings. And it's also become a much more interactive place where people are interacting with others, they're commenting, they're sharing, they're not just reading. So Facebook's not the only place you can do this, but it's the biggest, and it serves to illustrate the numbers. Facebook has 1.2 billion users per month. So half the Earth's internet population is using Facebook. They're a site, along with others, that's allowed people to create an online persona with very little technical skill. And people responded by putting huge amounts of personal data online. So the result is that we have behavioral, preference, demographic data for hundreds of millions of people, which is unprecedented in history. And as a computer scientist, what this means is that I've been able to build models that can predict all sorts of hidden attributes for all of you that you don't even know you're sharing information about. As scientists, we use that to help the way people interact online, but there's less altruistic applications. And there's a problem in that users don't really understand these techniques and how they work, and even if they did, they don't have a lot of control over it. So what I want to talk to you about today is some of these things that we're able to do, and then give us some ideas of how we might go forward to move some control back into the hands of users. So this is Target the company. I didn't just put that logo on this poor pregnant woman's belly. You may have seen this anecdote that was printed in Forbes magazine where Target sent a flyer to this 15-year-old girl with advertisements and coupons for baby bottles and diapers and cribs 2 weeks before she told her parents that she was pregnant. Yeah, the dad was really upset. So how did Target figure out that this high school girl was pregnant before she told her parents? It turns out that they have the purchase history for hundreds of thousands of customers, and they compute what they call a pregnancy score, which is not just whether or not a woman's pregnant, but what her due date is. And they compute that not by looking at like the obvious things like she's buying a crib or baby clothes, but things like she bought more vitamins than she normally had, or she bought a handbag that's big enough to hold diapers. And by themselves, those purchases don't seem like they might reveal a lot, but it's a pattern of behavior that when you take it in the context of thousands of other people, starts to actually reveal some insights. So that's the kind of thing that we do when we're predicting stuff about you on social media. We're looking for little patterns of behavior that when you detect them among millions of people, lets us find out all kinds of things. So in my lab and with colleagues, we've developed mechanisms where we can quite accurately predict things like your political preference, your personality score, gender, sexual orientation, religion, age, intelligence, along with things like how much you trust the people you know and how strong those relationships are. We can do all of this really well. And again, it doesn't come from what you might think of as obvious information. So my favorite example is from this study that was published this year in the Proceedings of the National Academies. If you Google this, you'll find it. It's 4 pages, easy to read. And they looked at just people's Facebook likes, so just the things you like on Facebook, and used that to predict all these attributes along with some other ones. And in their paper, they listed the 5 likes that were most indicative of high intelligence. And among those was liking the page for curly fries. Curly fries are delicious, but liking them does not necessarily mean that you're smarter than the average person. So how is it that one of the strongest indicators of your intelligence is liking this page when the content is totally irrelevant to the attribute that's being predicted? And it turns out that we have to look at a whole bunch of underlying theories to see why we're able to do this. One of them is a sociological theory called homophily, which basically says people are friends with people like them. So if you're smart, you tend to be friends with smart people, and if you're young, you tend to be friends with young people. And this is well established for hundreds of years. We also know a lot about how information spreads through networks. It turns out things like viral videos or Facebook likes or other information spreads in exactly the same way that diseases spread through social networks. So this is something we've studied for a long time. We have good models of it. And so you can put those things together and start seeing why things like this happen. So if I were to give you a hypothesis, it would be that a smart guy started this page, or maybe one of the first people who liked it would have scored high on that test. And they liked it, and their friends saw it. And by homophily, we know that he probably had smart friends. And so it spread to them, and some of them liked it. And they had smart friends, and so it spread to them, and so it propagated through the network to kind of a host of smart people, so that by the end, the action of liking the curly fries page is indicative of high intelligence, not because of the content, but because the actual action of liking reflects back the common attributes of other people who have done it. So this is pretty complicated stuff, right? It's a hard thing to sit down and explain to an average user. And even if you do, what can the average user do about it? How do you know that you've liked something that indicates a trait for you that's totally irrelevant to the content of what you've liked? There's a lot of power that users don't have to control how this data is used. And I see that as a real problem going forward. So I think there's a couple paths that we want to look at if we want to give users some control over how this data is used, because it's not always going to be used for their benefit. An example I often give is that if I ever get bored being a professor, I'm going to go start a company that predicts all of these attributes and things like how well you work in teams, and if you're a drug user, if you're an alcoholic, we know how to predict all that. And I'm going to sell reports to HR companies and big businesses that want to hire you. We totally can do that now. I could start that business tomorrow, and you would have absolutely no control over me using your data like that. That seems to me to be a problem. So one of the paths we can go down is the policy and law path. And in some respects, I think that that would be most effective, but the problem is we'd actually have to do it. Observing our political process in action makes me think it's highly unlikely that we're going to get a bunch of representatives to sit down, learn about this, and then enact sweeping changes to intellectual property law in the US so users control their data. We could go the policy route where social media companies say, you know what, you own your data, you have total control over how it's used. The problem is that the revenue models for most social media companies rely on sharing or exploiting users' data in some way. It's sometimes said of Facebook that the users aren't the customer, they're the product. And so how do you get a company to cede control of their main asset back to the users? It's possible, but I don't think it's something that we're going to see change quickly. So I think the other path that we can go down that's going to be more effective is one of more science. It's doing science that allowed us to develop all these mechanisms for computing this personal data in the first place. And it's actually very similar research that we'd have to do if we want to develop mechanisms that can say to a user, here's the risk of that action you just took. You know, by liking that Facebook page or by sharing this piece of personal information, you've now improved my ability to predict whether or not you're using drugs or whether or not you get along well in the workplace. And that, I think, can affect whether or not people want to share something, keep it private, or just keep it offline altogether. We can also look at things like allowing people to encrypt data that they upload, so it's kind of invisible and worthless to sites like Facebook or third-party services that access it, but that select users who the person who posted it want to see it have access to see it. This is all super exciting research from an intellectual perspective, and so scientists are going to be willing to do it. So that gives us an advantage over the law side. One of the problems that people bring up when I talk about this is they say, you know, if people start keeping all this data private, all those methods that you've been developing to predict their traits are going to fail. And I say, absolutely, and for me that's a success, because as a scientist, my goal is not to infer information about users, it's to improve the way people interact online. And sometimes that involves inferring things about them, but if users don't want me to use that data, I think they should have the right to do that. I want users to be informed and consenting users of the tools that we develop. And so I think encouraging this kind of science and supporting researchers who want to cede some of that control back to users and away from the social media companies means that going forward, as these tools evolve and advance, means that we're going to have an educated and empowered user base. And I think all of us can agree that that's a pretty ideal way to go forward. Thank you.
Have you ever thought of that? That the things that you share can be worth that much? Now, what we'd like you to see from that is that it's not obvious what information is used for. And when we look at models of creating intelligence around customer understanding, it's not about I've got so many customers in those type of segments making so much money. It is actually quite a lot more. Because if we can start understanding and we say that this is how people are interacting with all of our digital platforms, and this is how that can be combined with the programs we are running. So when I run a promotion, this is how people react and where they are reacting. When there's bad news, maybe bad publicity about my company in the newspapers, this is where people are reacting. If whatever I do, if there's a sales promotion running, if there's a new product being launched, it's the combinations of information that becomes fascinating to us. And the more you start using it, the wealthier that information becomes in terms of the insight that it is generated. The problem is if you're not using it still, then it's very difficult to see why should we go into it fully. And we thought showing you something like this, I mean, that is horrifying to think that they can know somebody is pregnant even before the person has told somebody about that, just based on what they're going to buy. And we see it with information from like the grocery store, Tesco's as well. They've got this data where they show that they send people, they send their customers coupons for things they buy. Then when people buy baby diapers, they send them beer vouchers. Because what they realized is, and data showed them that people buying baby diapers have a far larger tendency to buy beer because they're not going out for the first couple of weeks or months of that baby's birth. They stay at home. So things that they might have had at a pub or at a restaurant, they now need to buy at home. So it changes their purchasing pattern just after the baby's birth. And the trigger is the purchasing of the diapers, and we send you beer vouchers. So it is not as if we can sit here by ourselves and just come up with these things. It is a level of intelligence that normal market research cannot offer you in that. And we only get that over years of accumulating customer data and understanding the patterns of how people react and truly being able to understand the personalities of the customers that's buying from us. We can do profiling on customers based on the information that we get that is really, really spectacular. Let's do a smoke break now. We've got about 20 minutes, 25 minutes left, okay?